Welcome to the Will Caminada Podcast. This is a conversation episode, and today I had the absolute pleasure to talk to Aaron Abke. Aaron is a spiritual teacher whose passion is to teach unity consciousness and spiritual awakening with the world. He has amazing videos on YouTube talking about the Law of One, A Course in Miracles, to name a few. He is full of wisdom. He teaches in a very clear, genuine, kind way. We talked about the Law of One, and if you're not familiar with the Law of One, you're in for a treat. And we also talked about the 7 densities of consciousness and how this relates to the work that I teach from the Pleiadians and the 9 dimensions of consciousness. I hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment or a review, and share this episode with a friend. Enjoy the show. Hey Aaron, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Will. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
I've been watching your YouTube videos and consuming your beautiful work, learning a lot about the Law of One. So thank you very much. And I would love to talk about the Law of One and the evolution of consciousness in this episode. But first, I'd love to talk about the evolution of consciousness of Aaron, your evolution of consciousness.
Nice.
According to your bio, you were raised as a pastor's son, and then you went from that to studying music and theology. And then you became a fitness model, bodybuilder, to the spiritual teacher that you are today. I just find it fascinating. I actually have a degree in music too. What did you study?
That's rad. So my major was vocal performance because I'd been leading worship, most of my young adult life, and wanted to do that as my first church job and work my way into being a senior pastor one day, like my dad. Mm-hmm. So I just did vocal performance, and then I got another bachelor's. It was like a dual bachelor's degree in theology as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what made you choose the spiritual path? You were in a religious path. What happened? Tell us a little bit about your journey as Aaron in this lifetime, in this now moment.
When you said that, it was funny. It sparked the thought of me of that I didn't choose the thug life. The thug life chose me. You've heard that before? It was kind of like that with the spiritual life. It wasn't something I ever chose, but more so that it happened to me, in the sense that I was taught that all this stuff was wrong, evil, wicked, sinful, etc. And so I never would have ever imagined myself not being a traditional Christian. And it just happened by means of, like you said, my own evolution of consciousness. Slowly, old beliefs stopped resonating, as it does for every Christian who starts questioning and comes out of that sort of dogmatic framework. The rapture stopped making sense. Hell stopped making sense. The Bible being written by God, being inerrant, didn't make sense anymore. And I was working a church job after college, full-time as a worship pastor, and I just had all kinds of internal conflicts going on. One of them being, I felt almost like it was not wrong, but counterintuitive to the gospel that Jesus preached, to be like taking a big salary to work at a church when, Jesus was pretty clear that his ministry and his church was about feeding the poor, taking the widow, the orphan, visit the prisoner, heal the sick. And my church wasn't doing any of that, no outreach. All of our money was going to pastor salaries. And I was just like, this ain't the gospel of Jesus, man. This is something else. And I don't feel right here. It doesn't resonate. So I left the church, and that sparked the freedom in me to question things. Questioning the rapture came first. Questioning hell came second. And then once I could disprove the rapture and hell using the Bible, then I questioned if the Bible was actually inerrant. And that was kind of the last one to go. Once the Bible stopped being my one and only kind of rigid framework of reference, I then opened myself to all kinds of other religions and got into Eastern philosophies of Buddhism and Hinduism, especially, and then found the works of Alan Watts and Eckhart Tolle, and then A Course in Miracles, and then the Law of One. And so it just kind of led me one step to another, one breadcrumb to another, I would say, to where I am today.
Yeah, and you mentioned you started questioning, and I think that's like one of the first steps for awakening, right? And I think especially last year with the situation of the world, I think a lot of people have started to question their lifestyles, their choices. Was there a pivotal moment in your awakening journey that sort of triggered your spiritual awakening, or was it more like a gradual questioning and finding?
Yeah, there was a lot of moments I could point to. I sort of had two awakenings in the sense that I woke out of religion first. And that was like my big matrix red pill moment at that time. Like, whoa, the world isn't Christian, like that's not the nature of the universe. And then some 4 years later at 27, I had what you would consider like a traditional spiritual awakening, which was really an awakening out of the person altogether. Mm-hmm. And as you said, it all has to begin from questioning, right? If you're going to wake up from this dream that you're in, or this matrix that you're in, sort of like Neo, you've got to start by first questioning it. Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to question the dream, then you're going to just keep taking that blue pill and keep re-entering the dream world. So at some point, the red pill moment is when you start to go, maybe my view of reality has been wrong in some way. Let me become open to new possibilities of how reality works. And reality always honors that in my experience. When you come humbly and say, oh, I think I was off track there. Please show me the way you actually are. Reality loves to open its arms to you, right? It's just when you think you know and you hold tightly with that white knuckle grip to your beliefs, then reality is going to honor that every time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And how did you find the Law of One, or how did it find you?
Good question. I don't honestly totally remember how I found it. It had been on my radar for a long time. And I think I saw a video on YouTube or something where somebody mentioned the 7 densities, and it made a lot of sense to me the way they explained it. And I went, wow, this is fascinating. And then I thought, maybe it's time for me to read that text that I've heard a lot here and there in the ether. And the name's very intriguing. The Law of One sounds right up my alley. Just didn't get around to it for a few years. And then when I did, it was just like such a life-altering experience to read that text. I actually listened to it the first time, and I was blown away that there wasn't more content about it on the internet. I guess in one hand, I understand why, because it is very dense, very deep, very metaphysical, and it takes a certain level of adeptness to grasp it. So for that reason, it does make sense. There's not a ton of content on it. But on the other hand, it's like if even one person really understood this text, you would think they'd be screaming it from the mountaintops, So I sort of thought, well, I understand at least the basics of what this text is laying forward. So why not me? I'll start making videos about it. And I really didn't expect people to resonate with it to the level that they did. But the moment I dropped the first video on the 7 densities of consciousness, people were like, oh my God, more of this, please give me more.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I mean, all of your series are amazing. And I love the fact that it's digestible, like the way you explain it, we can understand. And I didn't read the whole book, but I've read excerpts of it. And you're right. It's very dense. And even the language, you sort of like need to understand the whole context, the words that he uses to when his channeling. For anyone who's completely new to the Law of One and the raw material, or raw, the entity, could you give us a little explanation of what it is and who is Ra?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny when you talk about Ra. I always do this too, and I hear many people do it. Refer to Ra as he, because Ra, the Egyptian god, is the male god of the sun, and it's so hard to change our framework around these concepts because Ra isn't a person or an individual. Ra is, from their definition, a social memory complex of the 6th density of consciousness. And I know we'll get into that in a second, but basically it's a group mind. And this is essentially, apparently, actually, the way that all consciousness evolves in the universe, is that at some point when the individual soul has reached a certain point of its kind of evolutionary journey and it's polarized as high as it can go in consciousness, it then can only continue evolving by joining minds with others. And then eventually an entire planetary civilization shares one mind, or you could almost say like a library of memory. And every individual in that social memory complex has access to everyone's memories. So sense of individuality kind of goes out the window at that point. But in a sense, individuality becomes the complex itself. So almost like an oversoul or an overmind. And as species evolve, entire planets become this way, where you could almost say it's like the planet evolves into being a conscious entity, which is the memory complex of the entire civilization on the planet. So we are joined with Mother Earth, and we will be, and we already are, but we're evolving into becoming, in a sense, Mother Earth's mind, where we will all share that mind together. And that's what Ra is, but of the planet Venus. And this is what's kind of interesting about the Law of One. Well, there's a lot of things that are, but this is one of the points I like the most, which is that Ra said back in the 80s that they were from the planet Venus from about 2 billion years ago when they were in third density. And they're now in the sixth density. So they no longer inhabit that planet in this dimension. But in September of 2019, I believe, NASA released a study they'd been doing on Venus, and they said Venus, about 2 billion years ago, spent many, many millions of years, hundreds of millions of years in the Goldilocks zone, with water and most likely life and all kinds of stuff. And eventually their planet became inhabitable after that cycle had finished. But science lines up right with what Ra said from 40 years ago now. And so I say all that to say that what the Law of One is a text channeled by a woman named Carla Ruckart and a man named Don Elkins, who served as the questioner, and then a third person named Jim McCarty, who was the scribe, kind of transcribing the sessions. And that group of 3 people did these dedicated channeling sessions with this entity they had found contact with named Ra. And Ra in the Law of One, essentially, it's all question and answer, the whole text, but kind of answers their questions about the nature of reality in the universe. And their basic philosophy of the universe is that all is one, which is traditional spirituality, really, but everything is the one creator. You are, I am, the positive and the negative are, dark and the light. And the whole universe is the creator knowing itself. And it's doing this knowing through this process of evolution, reincarnation, the journey of the soul. So to say the least, it's a very remarkable text to read.
Wonderful explanation. I have a few questions. Is the Ra from Egypt sort of the same, or are, should I say, because it's
yeah.
They mention we, right, in the book. They say we.
Mm-hmm. And actually, to that point, that's why you'll notice if you read channeled works, almost all channeled works speak in the plural form of we.
Yeah.
We communicate, we this, we that, because it's typically at that density of consciousness, you're talking to a memory complex at that point. But yes, Ra is, in a sense, the same Ra from Egypt, but not that they are the sun god from Egypt, but that the social memory complex from Venus visited Egypt about 11,000 years ago, according to them, because they saw that Egypt was in a certain predicament where the aging process of the body was, and we know this through science, was only about 30 years. And there's actually a Egyptology museum here in Colorado I went to last year where they have mummies and sarcophagus on display. And I was reading about some of them, and they were saying that, yeah, these people, this mummy was 28 years old and died of old age, essentially. 30 years was kind of the average lifespan back then. So Ra from Venus saw this predicament that Earth was in, where the souls were stuck in this perpetual spiritual childhood because they couldn't even live long enough to really learn the lessons of third density and grow. Mm-hmm. And so they came to Egypt because Egypt's beliefs were very pantheistic, which was in alignment with Ra's understanding of the universe. So from their point of view, it wasn't an infringement of their free will to kind of show up among them and help teach them, because they already believed that all is one, everything is God. So sorry, I got a construction guy here.
Yeah, happens here too.
Yeah. So they came to Egypt. They built the pyramids for the Egyptians to be basically healing centers and centers of spiritual evolution. So one of the purposes of the pyramids, and this is just so mind-blowing, man. This is so fun to talk about, because Egyptologists don't really know what the pyramids were, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, maybe they were tombs for pharaohs, but it's all just conjecture because they don't have any actual evidence that it was. And so we have, like the king's chamber on the top, the queen's chamber below, and these channels that run between them. And it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense why you'd build this giant structure that's absolutely impossible for humans to build, just to put these two little buildings in the middle, rooms rather. And so Ra says what they were trying to teach the Egyptians was how to perform physical healing using crystals. Apparently, a crystal is kind of like a miniature version of what we as souls are supposed to become, which Ra calls the crystallized entity. Meaning when we balance our energy centers, our chakras, we cleanse them of distortions, we become like a crystal, which is, a crystal is one pure element, like amethyst or whatever the mineral is. So it has no contaminants in it. A crystal is very strong without any effort, which is like a spiritually evolved person. A crystal is able to reflect and radiate light, which brings beauty to the eye and all that stuff. So that's like what a spiritually evolved, crystallized being becomes. So Ra was teaching the Egyptians this and showing them that if you balance your energy centers, if one being who's crystallized uses a crystal and channels healing energy into it, they can pass that to another person. And if the entity who's performing the healing work is crystallized, intelligent energy can flow through them and heal the other person and start hopefully elongating the lifespan in Egypt so they could actually grow spiritually. So they were in the process of teaching the Egyptians this using the pyramids, the pyramid being a very powerful sacred geometric shape that funnels energy to a point. They were using that shape to do this kind of sensory deprivation process, which was what I believe Queen's Chamber was for. In the same way we use sensory deprivation tanks and people have these really amazing cosmic consciousness experiences, they were using the pyramids for that to initiate people to become crystallized. So they would essentially have an ego death, realize oneness with the universe, come out of that experience with much more resource to balance themselves. And they were just putting people through this process and then teaching them the ways of physical healing after that. And Ra said where it started to go astray was that the elites started using this knowledge to gain more power over the people, and they started saving this knowledge for only the elites to be used. And Ra said this was a huge infringement of the law of one, which is that everyone's equally valid. And it was being so distorted by the Egyptians that I think Ra says we found ourselves in a sort of contradictory predicament where we were now sort of infringing on them, and it was being so distorted we just thought we better just leave. So they said we just left Egypt at that point, and it was our desire to come back at some point when that was available to help balance those distortions we created on accident. And so they found a channeling group in the 1980s of Dawn, Carla, and Jim, who from their point of view were in harmony enough with the law of one to receive their channeling without distorting it too much. And so they spoke the law of one. So they were called Ra by the Egyptians. They aren't actually the sun god from Egypt, but when the Egyptians met Ra, they went, oh, you're the sun god, right? And they called them Ra. So that's how they addressed themselves to our planet, essentially.
Well, luckily for us, they didn't give up on Earth.
I know, right? God.
So
we need some help down here.
Yeah. Were they trying to, in a way, guide planet Earth through the same shift in evolution that happened in Venus? Because as far as I know, Venus has already shifted into a fourth density or 5D level of consciousness, so much so that its archetype is love and the goddess of love. Were there pyramids there as well to make the connection?
In Egypt?
in Venus?
Oh, in Venus. That's a great question. I don't know if they ask Ra that. I'm pretty sure they don't because I've read it like 7 times. So I'm pretty sure that's not in there. But that is an interesting question because every planetary civilization essentially follows the same blueprint for evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Egyptians, or if Ra came to build pyramids for the Egyptians for these purposes of healing and self-realization, you would imagine that that's probably something they had done on their planet, right? So I think that's a safe bet. But the difference is with densities and dimensions is a bit hard for people to grasp because it sounds like a similar thing, and it is similar. But as we know, there are 9 dimensions, but there are technically 7 densities because the 8th density is the beginning of the next octave or universe of experience. So I like to help people understand what we mean when we say densities, is that a density refers to the actual vibratory rate of the photon of light. Mm-hmm. And so as the photon increases its vibration, or like the density of light in a certain space, the faster the photon is vibrating in a given space, like if it vibrates 10 times a second versus 100,000 times a second, well, there's a lot more light in the 100,000 times per second space than the 10 times per second space. So that density of light has that much more information, because light is information. Light is energy. So the more energy or information is available, the more ability consciousness has to express itself. So the densities model is very similar to, as you would appreciate, the musical scale. You have 7 major notes. The 8th note is the first note of the next octave, right? Mm-hmm. And so same thing with the color wheel. You have 7 colors. When you get to the 8th color, it's back to red again or whatever. So Ra says that's actually the way that the universe works. And so for that reason, they actually call universes octaves instead.
Yeah. So essentially the universe is an infinite giant keyboard and we're like playing in the lower keys for now.
Yes, that's one of my favorite analogies for the universe. It's like a song the creator is singing, and those 7 notes make up the scale of that song, you could say.
Yeah, I find some similarities too, because as I told you before we start recording, I read and I study and I also teach the book from Barbara Hand-Clow. It's a book called Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, and it's also a channeled material that she channeled from the Pleiadians, who she says that there are 5th dimensional beings, and they're also helping us in this evolution. So let's talk about it. I thought it would be nice if you could take us through the densities. I can maybe throw in some similarities that I find, because I do find a lot of, and I think that was actually one of my questions to you on Instagram. That's how I connected with you. Because I kept hearing you talking about 4th density and the heart chakra and love, unconditional love, and that's very much 5D. Right. I wanted to know, are they the same thing? You were talking earlier about the crystal, the power of the crystal, and according to the Pleiadians, the 1st dimension is actually an iron core crystal in the very center of planet Earth. And she also says that it's where the Akashic records are. One of the dimensions where the Akashic records are, because it's like the solidification. That's the way I see it. It's the solidification of the cosmos to start planet Earth and to start the evolution. And that's also, I mean, we have iron in our blood, and also we have tiny crystals in our pineal gland. So right, all connected. And the other thing that she talks about is that the frequency that the 1st dimension is at in hertz is 40, which is where we're at in beta level, when we're awakened, when we're alert. So what is the first density from the material of the Law of One?
Yeah, so many cool parallels here. And I'm very interested in reading this channel work you're talking about, because I'm sure I'll find a ton of mind-blowing similarities as well. So remember, when we talk about densities, we're not talking about physical matter, because that's more of dimensions, but actually the ability consciousness has to express itself based on the vibratory rate of the photon. And so at the first density, we're just talking about the four elements: earth, water, fire, air. So consciousness interacts in that form for, at least on our planet, it was about 2 billion years or something. Mineral life, water interacting with fire, magma, lava, air, wind. Those elements just keep interacting in a totally randomized pattern until eventually some kind of microbial life evolved on Earth. And that would be the beginning of the second density of consciousness, where now consciousness, or the vibratory rate of the photon, has expanded enough to where consciousness can experience growth and movement, interaction with its environment. So now the movement consciousness does or experiences isn't randomized. It's actually, it has a purpose and a meaning, right? So second density is everything from basically microbial life through plant life, insect life, and animal life. That's all second density. And third density evolves once consciousness is able to become self-aware. So in each density level, consciousness learns the lessons of that density until it masters them, because everything evolves in the whole universe, right? It's a linear process. So once consciousness masters that, it becomes self-aware, meaning now I know that I exist as a concept in the mind. I can conceptualize existence. So mind comes into play, and that's third density. And that's where the ego evolves through self-awareness. Once I'm an object to myself, now I can think about future, and I can think about the past, and I can define myself according to past and future. And that's what ego is. So ego brings about a lot of really great things and a lot of really challenging, difficult things. Some of the good things it brings about is structure, technology, innovation, the social hierarchy. And it's also important to know that every density correlates to a chakra. So our root chakra is the first density, the red ray, and that's just our basic primal animal nature, which is really just like our survival nature and our sexual nature, just those two things. The second density or second chakra is the sacral, the orange ray chakra, and that's our personal will, our relationship to ourself, the way we think and feel about ourself. And then the third chakra is the solar plexus, which is our relationship to the other. And so that's why the solar plexus chakra is the beginning of ego, because ego is essentially what the mind created through the social hierarchy. How do other people see me? How do I gain favor in their eyes? Because, hey, the more favor I gain in the eyes of the social hierarchy, the higher up the totem pole I go. And vice versa, if I do something that is unfavorable to the hierarchy. So it's really becomes life or death in a way, right? If I do something to the social hierarchy that makes them dismiss me enough, if I upset them or betray them or anger them, they might kick me out of the tribe, or they might even execute me. So all of a sudden, social survival becomes as important as physical primal survival, right? And so through that, we get war, tribalism, separation, division, fight to get to the top, Darwinian evolution at its best, right? And through that war and conflict that consciousness experiences, it eventually starts to learn the lessons of love and oneness. And so this is kind of where our human species is right now, is we're at this kind of precipice of entering the fourth density of consciousness, where consciousness now has the capacity, which it didn't have before, to look out at the world and say, okay, we're all in different bodies, yes, but we're all one being. It's just one consciousness here expressing itself through all these forms. So it goes a lot better for us if we work together and love each other. All this fighting and division really just works against all of us. That's a fourth density perception, right? So this is where we're at, entering fourth density consciousness, which would be synonymous with fifth dimensional consciousness, which, going back to the pyramid, right, as you well know, the fifth dimension kind of represents, if we imagine like a square, That's a four dimensions. The fifth dimension is that point on the top, which creates the pyramid, which is really like an aerial view. Now, I can look down and see that all is one. It's all connected. There's no separation. That's a fifth dimensional perspective, or a fourth density perspective of the universe.
Wonderful. I've heard you mention, or in the book, they talk about the path of service to self and service to others, right? So that's in the third density, in third dimensional. The Pleiadians talk about being the realm of linear space and time. And by the way, the second dimension is pretty similar too, because it's the space between that core crystal and the crust of the earth. So it has to do with the telluric realm and elementals and minerals and bacteria. But I love that the idea that here on the third dimensional world, we have this ability to choose, right?
Yeah.
The polarity, right? And I actually want to quote one thing that I heard from one of your videos that I think it explains super well. You say that consciousness sleeps in the rock, dreams in the animal, and awakens in the human. So I love that, because it's just so simple, but like it explains everything. Could you talk a little bit about that that choice that we have here, that path to service to others and service to self, and the polarity?
Yeah, this is really, for me, Will, what's most interesting about the law of one material is the service to self versus service to others path. Because when you start to get it, it really makes everything very simple. Like every action you take, every relationship you have with someone else, you start seeing it as like, was that a service to others or service to self relation I just had? Was I looking out for me or for them? And spiritual progress becomes increasingly easy when you look at it through that lens. And so, the biggest point about third density, which we're really still in right now, even though we technically in 2012, the planet was magnetized to the fourth density of consciousness. We're still living in the remnants of third density world, right? Because it's all evolution. So we really just stepped on the first step of that fourth density staircase, and we're looking up at it, right?
Just by the way, they also talk about the 2011, 2012.
Not surprised.
And she says that the Pleiadians or the Mayans are very much the Pleiadians. Like they have a really close connection with them.
Relationship.
Yeah, and they basically said that 2011, 2012, the shift happened in the sense that these dimensions, these densities became more available for us to access them, to expand.
Yes. Yeah. Another interesting correlation with this text in the Law of One that you're talking about that just struck me was that Ra says that another social memory complex came to visit, they say, the South America around the same time, which would be the Mayans, right? Wow. And they built some pyramids there. The Mayans had pyramids as well. And they said that although Ra did not return again to Egypt, the social memory complex, they don't say what it was or where it was from, came back again to South America a number of times, working with those people groups on whatever it was they were trying to deliver. So probably a good chance it was the Pleiadian social memory complex working with the Mayans.
Yeah, and then she always refers to them as well, like you say, like a complex social memory or a group of beings. And I've actually recently been to Tulum, and I went to the Mayan ruins, and I thought it was fascinating because the guide was she didn't have any like spiritual explanation of anything, but she was just saying that the Mayans believed that death wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was actually just another step to the evolution of the soul or the spirit. And they believed that once the soul made a transition, it would go through 9 dimensions and it would come back within the same family unit. And I thought, okay, 9 dimensions, there's like some correlation with that. So
wonder where they got that from, huh?
Yeah.
I'm actually going to Tulum next month, and I plan on doing the Mayan tour when I get there. So that'll be really fun.
Yeah, you'll love it. And I recommend you go to Chichen Itza too.
That's where I'm planning on.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But sorry, you were talking about the polarity, and I think that's
Yeah.
also another question that I had about it, because we tend to get a little bit confused when we talk about duality and polarity, because like 3D, we experience duality. From
Yeah.
the law of one perspective, are they the same, or is there a difference?
Yeah. Great question. I would say they're the same in a sense, and they're different in a sense. I would say that they're the same in the sense that duality creates polarity, but duality in itself, so polarity refers to the positive and the negative viewpoints of the universe, and you can actually evolve. The soul can evolve down either one of those polarities, but duality itself doesn't actually infer a path or a positive or a negative. It just infers the perception that there is a self and an other. There's something other than the self is duality, but out of duality, eventually the polarities were able to evolve.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And they mentioned that in the book too, that like polarity is just necessary for the creation of them.
Absolutely.
Negative,
Yep.
positive, yin and yang, feminine, masculine.
Yep. Yeah. Nothing can be known without contrast, right? So that's one of the basic foundational laws in the law of one, is that everything's equally valid. The negative is just as valid to the creator as the positive. And they actually say the creator does not blink at the light or the darkness. Mm-hmm. And the intelligent infinity of the creator is equally available to both polarities. And that's where it gets really interesting when you look at what's the philosophy, because it's really different viewpoints about reality that you have. And there's just basically two. And until you figure out which one of those you want, you kind of stay in this middle ground, fighting between the two, positive, negative, service to self, service to others. And that's what third density is for. It's kind of like a choosing ground for the soul. And it's the only density of self-consciousness where there's what's called the veil of forgetting, where the intelligence of the creator veils third density from any soul that incarnates into a third density body doesn't have access to previous memories while they're there. Mm-hmm. And that is for the purpose of allowing the soul to have a totally uninfringed, authentic decision between the positive and the negative. Like, which one does your soul genuinely gravitate towards? Because if you remember where you come from, or you know the game you're playing, that might change your stance on which polarity you choose. But we don't get access to those memories. We just sort of find ourselves in these bodies with no explanation of how did I get here? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And so then we wrestle with
manual.
these. No manual whatsoever. So that means we have to meet life authentically and naturally, right? And the way that we deal with the catalyst of life, whether we see it with love or with separation, determines which direction we start polarizing. And you don't make it out of third density until your soul has chosen the positive or the negative. And that choosing, Ross says, is that your soul must be at least 51% or more oriented towards service to others. That's the positive path. But to choose the negative polarity, the soul has to be 95% or more service to self-oriented, meaning you have to have basically a complete, unwavering commitment to the negative path in order to sustain it, because the nature of the positive path is it's the path of harmony and unity, balance. The negative is the opposite of the positive. That's its nature, right? So it's the path of distortion, high entropy, chaos, structure. So to sustain that, you've got to be extremely committed to it, whereas the positive path lends itself more naturally to balance and harmony and ease.
All right. And so when we're talking about planet Earth, Mother Earth, as a being, does it shift, or does it evolve because of our choices? Or is it more like they are, Mother Earth is shifting, and whoever is not evolving will incarnate in a third density planet or somewhere else? How does that happen?
Yeah, that's basically it. you could look at it different ways, right? You could say, in a sense, people don't exist. There's only Earth. And humans, is just something Earth is doing, right? So we are Earth in that sense. And so the Earth's density and polarity is basically decided by the sum total of the population on the planet's density or polarity. So if our planet, and now we did apparently graduate to a fourth density positive planet, but just barely, according to Ra, we just made that 51% mark. And that's where a lot of souls hang out. It's really easy to hang out in that 6% to 50% margin. It's not as easy to choose to be 95% negative or 51% positive, because that means you have to know what game you're playing. Mm-hmm. So spiritual awakening is a prerequisite to both polarities. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, the really interesting part to me about the service to self path versus service to others, is that we have a lot of misconceptions about what it means to be service to self. And it doesn't mean that you stay unconscious. The service to self being still learns about the nature of reality, still awakens that the person is an illusion, all is being dreamt by the one mind. They know all this stuff. But the difference in philosophy is that the service to self path says, okay, all is one, which means nothing else exists. It's all just characters in my dream. I am the God of this dream. And so the service to self being polarizes spiritually, gains in power spiritually by controlling and manipulating and dominating and conquering other dream characters in the dream. Mm-hmm. And every time that the service to self being uses its willpower and gains the service of others to itself, to its own benefit, it's almost like it becomes more godlike in the dream, and it polarizes to the negative more. The positive path is the opposite. It says, okay, all is one, which means everything is me having a different experience. So now I am as equally concerned with the well-being of all as myself, right? Mm-hmm. So the positive polarity gains in charge, literally just like an electron, right? An electron, in order to do any work in quantum mechanics, it has to be polarized positively or negatively. Otherwise, it has no charge. So for a soul to be able to do work in consciousness, telepathy, time travel, all this other stuff, it has to be charged with a polarity. So the positive polarity then polarizes by serving others, which is really the demonstration that all is one. And through service to others, consciousness's vibration increases and it becomes more powerful and really more unified with creation. So it's just an endlessly fascinating dynamic to me, the way these two polarities work. And Ra explains a lot about the service to self polarity, that they come very much like the Bible says, clothed as an angel of light, wolf in sheep's clothing, right? They come well dressed, gorgeous to look at. They use every aspect to their advantage. Physical appearance, they say the service to self beings are very beautiful to look at. They're extremely wise and intelligent. You can think almost like a cult leader, right? They know how to speak just the right things to get you to go, oh, that makes sense to me. I'm going to follow what this guy has to say. And then they just introduce a little distortion to get you to give away some of your power. Mm-hmm. So they'll basically say like, hey man, if you follow me, I can make you great. I can give you lots of power. I can show you how to achieve all the things I've achieved. And you go, okay. And then boom, all of a sudden you're now essentially my servant. And then the dynamics are increasingly distorted from that point on.
And this all happens still in the third density.
Well, in a sense, yes. That choosing happens in the third density, but the dynamic I just spoke about of like one entity of its own free will devoting into service or really slavery to another as its master, that happens from fourth through sixth density, basically.
Yeah, because you mentioned control and power. And that's it's a topic in the 4D level of consciousness that they talk about, because essentially the 4D is the realm of the collective mind and feelings and archetype.
Right.
And so in the book, she talks about also the fact that the people in the power, the global elite, are operating from a 4D level of consciousness, keeping us from evolving because it's
Mhm.
the realm of the collective mind and keeping us in fear and manipulating. And she says it's basically where, religion and politics operate. She also talks about
Yes.
the Anunnakis and some of the ETs in that realm. She also talks about the gatekeepers in each dimension. So they say that human beings are the gatekeepers of the 3D, and so
Mm.
3D can evolve because of us. So it's kind of like that idea of choosing the path, the positive and the negative. Does
Yeah.
Ra say anything about gatekeepers or higher dimensional beings in different densities helping us?
I'm not totally familiar with that concept, so I'm not entirely sure if there's any parallels there, but it sounds like there probably are, in the sense that Ra speaks a lot about guides and teachers of higher densities, that the way that consciousness evolves in higher densities is by serving lower densities.
Mm-hmm.
Lower densities are here. We're just trying to figure this thing out, really. Like, what game are we playing? How do I evolve? Those kinds of questions. And higher density beings are here to teach us those things, and really teach us, but more like help us learn more efficiently, right? They don't want to give us answers, because one of the other key components of positive versus negative is that the positive polarity is depolarized if it infringes on a being's free will. The negative polarity doesn't get depolarized by infringing on free will, but they can't polarize more unless they gain that being's free will of their own volition. So like a negative polarity ET race wouldn't come here and like take us over militarily or destroy us or blow up our planet. It'd be absolutely no benefit to them.
Mm-hmm.
They actually want to keep us alive because we're like their food source. They want to come, share their philosophy to us, show us their technology, show us all the things they can offer us, and then say, now, would you like to serve us and we can make you great? And we say, yes, we'll serve you. And that's how they polarize. They gain power that way. And to your point just now, Will, you're saying that we see this dynamic a lot in our world today where, and really it's always been happening, right? We're just kind of realizing it, that the powers that be have been telling us they have our best interest in mind and telling us the things that they think we want to hear so that we trust them. But behind the scenes, behind the curtains, they're taking all the power for themselves. And it's all for their own best interest. And we've been sort of hoodwinked by them. That's the service to self right there. We can see it happening perfectly in our world today.
Excellent. Let's shift to higher densities. Can you tell us a little bit about the fourth density, which is where would you say it's where we are or where we're heading to?
Yeah, it's where we are in the sense that the space-time nexus, we could say, that planet Earth has shifted into is now a fourth density vibration, but the planet, the physical planet itself, is still carrying the remnants of third density, right? So we don't get rid of those remnants without healing them and balancing them. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen in our world today through the pandemic and then all the other shadow aspects of the human collective that have risen to the surface as a result of the pandemic. You know, the pandemic was just kind of the fire starter in a sense, and then all the demons came out of the closet at once, right? So this is a good thing in the long run. We have to see these demons manifest, see them for what they are, so we can go beyond them. Just like how we individually have to do shadow work, we have to collectively do shadow work as humanity. So it is a good thing in the long run, but it's very challenging while it's here. But it's helping usher us into fourth density. So we are there, but collectively it's up to us to really wake up, evolve, and contribute to that planetary consciousness, because each and every one of us that wakes up does help increase the sum total of the planet, right? So in that sense, our healing is the world's healing.
Beautiful. And what's the time span? Like, I've heard something related to like 30 million years between one
for fourth density.
Yeah. So So what is 100 years, right? For us.
Exactly. Yeah. That quick.
Yeah, I guess that puts things into perspective. Not that we're gonna say, okay, so I'm not gonna evolve then just because it's gonna take a long time. I'm not even gonna be here. But I think sometimes we think that the evolution or the shifts, the palpable shifts, need to happen like now. And
Right.
when you think about that time span, it's just like, okay, I'm doing my best here in this lifetime. Hopefully, I'm contributing to the evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, just make use of the time you have here, right? Which means take responsibility for your own growth. Because not only does your growth directly contribute to the planet's growth, but you become an influencer to everyone you interact with. They see your state of consciousness. They get to experience that it is a higher, more efficient, more loving, more enjoyable state of consciousness, which then invites them to begin to really have the desire to want to step into that themselves. And that's the only way growth ever happens, is the individual has to desire it of their own free will. Otherwise, it can't happen.
Yeah. And the heart is really the pivotal moment or like the chakra that needs to be open in order for us to evolve, right? And that's where the fourth density is. Can you tell us a little bit more about the fourth and the heart or love?
Yeah. Ra calls the heart chakra, I believe, the great stepping stone of the energy body. If you think about it, right, you got 7 chakras. So there's 3 on top, 3 on bottom, 1 in the center. The fourth chakra is that middle center point between the lower 3 primal centers and the upper 3 spiritual centers. And the energy flows from bottom to top as we evolve, just like consciousness moves through the first through the 7th. It doesn't go 7th down to first, right? Mm-hmm. So as we undistort each chakra, the energy can flow up each level. And once the first 3, root, sacral, solar plexus chakras have been opened and unbalanced, then the energy can now hit the heart chakra and can travel up to the fourth chakra, which is the chakra of universal love. That's where, as we talked about, consciousness now has the ability to go, oh, wait a second, all is one. What have I been doing? Creating all this separation and strife. Everyone's myself. And then Ra says, as soon as the heart center's opened, all 3 spiritual chakras, the throat, pineal gland, and crown chakra, all become accessible immediately, all at once. So it's not the same as the... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not the same as the bottom 3 where you have to go one at a time, but you can begin doing work immediately on the indigo ray, let's say, or crown or whatever, as soon as the heart is open. So universal love is the key to understanding everything about the universe and to accessing everything, including telepathy. Every psychic ability on the positive polarity has to begin with love. Yeah. I can't communicate my thoughts into your mind unless I love you. Because love is really it's the connection between us vibrationally. Yeah.
And that's why I focus so much on opening the heart and finding that inner guidance through the heart. I say, the heart is really the portal to higher dimensions of consciousness. And so what are the next ones? So the 5th and the 6th and the 7th, what are they like in terms of densities?
Yeah. Just another endlessly interesting topic. I'll do my best to simplify it because there's so much we could say.
Yeah.
But to your point, Ross says that love is the strongest magic in the universe. It really is like the power center of every spiritual gift. So love opens up the ability for wisdom or self-knowledge, which is the throat chakra, which is what the throat chakra represents and allows access to, we could say. And so that is actually authenticity. That's a 5th density or 5th chakra ability to be authentic, which really means, what is authenticity? Authenticity is the soul's ability to express its self-knowledge. To be authentic is to know yourself, to accept yourself, and then to be that self in every moment, the same exact way, regardless of the actions of the other. right? Inauthenticity is when the way other people treat you changes how you act and who you are, because you're trying to get approval or validation. Exactly. You don't really accept or know yourself yet. So once you know yourself through love, you become authentic and you can express that self, your unique expression of the creator, because each and every one of us is a unique configuration of the source's consciousness, right? And that's such a beautiful thing. It's like we're all a unique crystal with a different color, a different hue, a different pattern. That's fifth density. So fifth density is the density of wisdom, or the light density. Fourth density is the love density. So love and then light. And then sixth density is the indigo ray, third eye chakra. And that is the density of unity, or Ra actually calls it the law of one density. And that is where both polarities meet together again and merge into one. So polarity is annihilated or unified. And love and wisdom have to be perfectly balanced. So you mentioned that fourth density, Ra says in the law of one, is around on average 30 million years. Like planet Earth will take 30 million years to go into fifth density. Fifth density, they don't say exactly how long it is, but somewhere around 50 million years. And then sixth density is around 75 million years. And of course, the perception of time changes dramatically at those densities. So it's not the way we think of it, but basically it takes the soul a long time to perfectly balance love with wisdom, and to merge polarities together. So the interesting thing is Ra says that the negative polarity can't actually evolve past early sixth density. That's the entropy is too high at that point, and the negative being finds itself at an impasse where no matter what it does, it can't gain any more charge. It can't gain any more ability in consciousness. So at some point, the negative being admits defeat in a sense and concedes to the positive path and reverses polarity. And that usually looks like going back to typically fourth density,
the heart,
and picking up the lessons from there. But both polarities merge, and there is no more polarity at sixth density. Seventh density is the crown chakra, which Ra calls the gateway density. And they say we don't actually know much about seventh density because we're not there yet. So very honest of them. But they say that they do have guides and masters of seventh density who teach them a little bit about it. And it's basically just the last step. You can think of it like the soul has 1 foot in the creator, 1 foot in manifestation, and it's just about to merge back into the source, but it's still reaching back into manifestation and pulling the others along with it, still teaching, still guiding. But Ra doesn't even know what the lessons the seventh density soul is learning at that point, because it's just so beyond where they're at. So it all begins and ends in mystery.
Yeah. Or it's the beginning of the next 8 notes, right? It's the
sequence. Exactly. A new Big Bang, a new universe.
Yeah, no, I love that. From the Pleiadians work, the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth dimension is six is the realm of sacred geometry. So it has to do with creativity and expression. Seventh is the sacred sound. And so sound creates geometry. And eighth is light. So it's God's consciousness. And they talk about the ninth dimension, which is something that I also don't understand much. Like the ninth is the one that I need to like reread it and study more. But even for Barbara, she did the first issue. She didn't quite understand the ninth dimension. And then she did a second issue. She basically talks that the ninth dimension is the realm of time, which for me was a little confusing because I thought, how can time be like above light and sacred sound?
Right.
But I'm just interested in knowing if Ra mentions anything about time, because we kind of know time more of like a 3D thing, like linear time and space. And as we go up into these higher dimensions, time expands and it's all like one now present moment. But does he mention anything about time at all?
Yeah, very much so. That's a very interesting concept in the law of one, because they explain it as, if you imagine like a coin, and there's two sides to the coin. One side is the space-time side, and the other side is the time-space side. And so Ra says that we live in the time-space realm, which basically means that time is the primary mover for us. Time is the primary way we experience the universe from this perspective. But the other side of the coin is the space-time realm, which we could call the astral plane. Like in a dream, time isn't the primary mover of a dream, is it? Mm-hmm. You don't really experience time in a dream. The dream feels that quick and it feels like eternity, like it was so long. Yeah. That's because space is the primary mover in that realm. So they play off one another, and it's like they're in a holographic form on the other side of one another. And so Ra says at their density, and I think probably at fifth density, because the fifth density soul, Ra says, spends almost all of its time, whereas fourth density is spending all of its time serving others and traveling the universe, visiting other planets, being of service to other worlds and all that. Fifth density then basically retreats into itself and spends a lot of time in isolation, contemplation, working on psychic powers, abilities and consciousness, time travel, space travel. And so the fifth density soul can travel outside of time because it now somehow gains access to the other side of the coin, and it can go to the space-time realm, which Ra explains is a lot like, if you imagine the globe, we see time as linear, but from like Ra's perspective, which is being channeled from space-time, they say, we are in the sixth dimension, thus we are able to be with you at any time. Time is not a limiting factor for us, so we can visit you guys in the 1700s and then the year 5000 and then go back to the year 1000. It's all just different points on a map for them. Mm-hmm. So it's like a globe where you have, Japan down here, New York up here, Canada, China, and there's people hustling and bustling around at every space on the globe, and they seem to be far apart, but it's all happening simultaneously. Yeah. And that's apparently the nature of time, is that it's actually all simultaneous and it's all already happened. Mm-hmm. And that's why we call it the dream world, right? It appears to be happening, but outside the dream, it's like looking at a Monopoly board or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess hearing you explaining it this way gives me more clarity about the ninth dimension being time, because we tend to say like time is an illusion, there's only now, and yes, but without time, is there evolution? And it's funny because we're talking about the Mayans and stuff, and they talk about the ninth dimension. The gatekeepers of the nine dimensions is the Tolkien, which is the Mayan calendar. So I guess maybe that's the ninth dimension in relation to planet Earth. I don't know, but she does also talk about that it's the black hole of the Milky Way into other galaxies. So it's kind of like what you were saying, is the next note of the next octave, the other universe.
Yeah, that's another interesting parallel then. Ra explains that black holes are when a solar system has finished its cycle, it's moved through all 7 densities and is merged back with the creator. At that point, the sun, the star, we know collapses on itself, or supernova, whatever happens. And the space it contained is now a black hole, which represents that space-time nexus has moved into the next universe. And that's sort of like, I don't know if it's a portal to the next universe or not, but it represents a star system that has gone through all 7 densities or all 9 dimensions.
It's beautiful. I mean, so much information. Yeah. I mean, I could talk to you for hours.
We absolutely could.
Just to wrap up our beautiful conversation, I usually ask my guests some fun and deep, I call it fun and deep questions. So they're kind of quick questions, and
nice.
Say whatever comes to your mind. And so the first one is, what's your definition of consciousness?
Mm. To me, consciousness is infinite possibility. That's what I would boil it down to.
Beautiful. So imagine that all of the books in the world were going to be destroyed and deleted forever, and you could save only one. Which book would you save and why?
Fantastic question. I have actually said this many times, and up to a year ago even, I would have said A Course in Miracles, simply because that was the book that just walked me out of my suffering and taught me about the nature of the mind and how to know myself and become one with the Creator. I really think that A Course in Miracles and Law of One are just beautiful dance partners, because the Law of One says, hey, here's the game you're playing, here's how it works, here's the map of the territory you're on. But A Course in Miracles really walks you through that map and shows you, here's how you get to fourth density, right? But now at this point, I feel like I've healed and expanded so much, and all the things that I used to suffer from are just kind of like a distant memory now. Mm-hmm. That now I would say, for me, I would save The Law of One for sure. That'd be my book.
Yeah. And I think The Course in Miracles is focused a lot on the ego, right? And like, it seems like it's very 3D roadmap kind of thing.
Yeah. Healing and all that.
Yeah. So next question, if you could ask Ra one question, what would it be? And can you guess the answer?
I've thought about this a lot as well. If I only had one question, I don't know. I don't know exactly. I'd have to think about this for a long time. But if I could just rattle one question off that I would like to ask, I have this sort of theory that, we said, what is the seventh density? How does the soul exist in seventh density? And there's this concept of the logos in the Law of One, which is, the galaxy is the first logos, which is like a sort of like a portion of the Creator's infinite intelligence that it isolates into a certain form. And that galaxy creates all the rules, the laws, physics, chemistry, everything that's going to take place in that galaxy. And then from there, the sub-logos is the star or a sun, right? And that sun creates all the rules and laws of its solar system, the way the planets will evolve and all that. And then each planet is a sub-logos. Each person is a sub-logos. So I often wonder, is the seventh density when we become like stars or galaxies? Like, does the soul have to serve in that realm to finish its experience of the universe? It feels like it makes sense to me, but Don never asked Ra that. So that's one thing that I have been curious about from the Law of One material.
You think it is?
Ra says some things that make me believe maybe not, which would then lead to a bunch of other questions like, okay, what is the logos? Does the soul is that a whole nother aspect of creation that we don't know about? But that would spark a lot of questions in me for sure.
Great. What is the one thing that people would be surprised to know about you?
Good question. Probably a lot of things that I'm not aware of, but one thing people typically are surprised about when they hear is that I got my degree in music. People say, oh, I had no clue you're musical, but it was like, yeah, that's how I spent the first 23 years of my life was all about music.
Yeah. And I think it's wonderful that I feel like you're breaking the mold of what the spiritual teacher looks like or has gone through, And I would say I fit into that category too. Like, you don't have to be
for sure
like Eckhart Tolle or Dr. Wayne Dyer or even like a
yoga right
thing. You don't have to be
Swami
vegan or do yoga. So I like that.
Yeah, that's important.
Let's suppose, and I think you believe in that too, that we sign contracts before coming into this life, and then we choose what we come here to learn, as well as to teach. For you, Aaron, in this lifetime, what do you think that is?
Oh, great question. I could say a few things, but I would probably say that this is actually in my cards, literally, but I think my soul probably came here. One of the primary purposes to learn how to use power in a more service to others way, perhaps. I've been told by a cardologist and an astrologer, according to their readings, that the readings seem to say that in my past lives, I had some kind of power or influence. I don't know what it was, but my soul wasn't satisfied with the way it used that power. And so it wanted to come back and, be a teacher or an influencer of some sort. And I have a lot of really big visions for what I want to do in the world and making global impact. And so it makes sense to me that because I want that so bad, that must have been a soul lesson that I chose when I came here.
Yeah. Beautiful. And last question. This question I actually stole from a podcast that I love from Lewis Howes. I don't know if you've heard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
totally.
I'm sorry, Lewis. I'm giving you credit, but I love this question. He asks at the end, and he talks about the 3 truths. So essentially it's this, like, imagine, hundreds of years from now, you're on your deathbed and all of the work that you've been doing that you've done will be deleted. And you have a piece of paper in your hands and you can only write 3 truths, and this is what's gonna live on. So that's like your legacy. What would you write in that paper? What are your 3 truths?
Yeah, fantastic question. So without spending time really thinking about it, I would say one thing I've seen in my short time in this life that is of primary importance is to really always strive to be your most authentic self. Like, be you, find out what you is and love that and be that and step into that, because that's where all of the power comes from. That's where all of the success will come from. Everything you're looking for really does come from finding out your unique expression of the creator and being that to the fullest. And that's something that's actually a very rare ability for people, at least in this density right now. So be your authentic self. I would say if I had to choose a second one in order of importance, rather, it would probably be strive for self-knowledge and never stop striving. You only can know the universe to the extent you know yourself first. And self-knowledge is the center for everything, really. So self-awareness, self-knowledge, always be in relentless pursuit for that. And that's really where authenticity comes from anyways. And then number 1 for me is love God with all your heart. There's nothing more important and more central to why you're here, to know yourself, to be happy, to be fulfilled, to access all the mystery and beauty and wonder of this universe, which is infinite. It's all available through love, and loving God is the train tracks that take you there. And without that, honestly, nothing has any meaning.
Beautiful. Aaron, I want to acknowledge you for your commitment to your work and to teaching everything that you've been learning, not just in terms of knowledge, but also your life experiences, and the way that you express yourself is very authentic, very loving. And that's why I think people connect so much with you. So I want to say thank you so much for all the work you're doing and for who you're choosing to be in this lifetime.
Well, that is an amazing compliment, and I appreciate that very much. And I would echo that right back to you, brother. I love the work you're doing. You're so authentic. You're so in yourself. You just emanate that love and that light. And that's what, man, we need more influencers like that. So it's been a pleasure to collaborate with you, my friend.
Thank you so much. And how can people connect with you? Just to wrap up.
I keep it the same everywhere, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, my website, YouTube. It's always /Aaron Abke. Easy.
Cool. And as usual, I'll just put all the links in the show's notes. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Much love.
Thank you, brother. Much love to you.
Thanks so much for listening or watching this show. If you would like to connect with Aaron or learn more about his work, you can go to his website, www.aaronabke.com. And there you'll be able to find his programs, connect with him on his socials, and find his amazing YouTube channel. If you want to become more familiar with the Law of One material, you can also go to www.lawofone.info. As usual, you can find the links on the show's notes. And once again, if this has brought you value, please subscribe to my podcast and share this episode with a friend who you think will benefit from this. If you share it on your social medias, don't forget to tag me and Aaron so that we know it's brought you value. As usual, keep shining your light, keep your heart open, and let love lead the way. I love you. See you in the next episode.